Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires. It's a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. You can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And again with me tonight is my host and T-Boy, Mark Johnson.
T-Boy, huh?
T-Boy, I don't know why I said that. Sorry, I had in the back of my mind that I would love a cup of tea right now. I'm sorry.
I was probably your T-Boy in another life.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, that it's not a T-Boy, people.
And hopefully I spilled a couple of cups in your lap.
Yeah, okay. But I really fancy a cup of tea right now. I do. Ah, that's the English in me, isn't it? Well, anyway, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Came off of it's my second weekend in a row going down to the shore.
You are the lucky boy.
Well, we tried to squeeze something in last minute because last weekend we went with my wife's family and
you enjoyed yourself.
We enjoyed ourselves, but yet at the very end of it, I looked at her and I go, you know what? I didn't speak 2 words to you the whole time we were down there. Because either she was monopolized talking to her parents and her mother, or I was talking to her sister, and it's like we haven't had a vacation away together. So we found a nice hotel that was down there we hadn't stayed at before. They had availability for this weekend, so we said, okay, let's do it. So the 2 of us went down there just for us, which was nice. And at the same time, they were having, you'll laugh at this, they were having a huge country music festival. It was a 4-day festival with 20 different groups with like a big name headliner each night. We got tickets for Saturday, and Carrie Underwood was supposed to be playing that night, but we went.
Sorry, Carrie Underwood, whoever you are.
She's a big country singer over here. But we wound up like having a blast because we bought like cheapo cowboy hats and these funny shirts and you know, they had like 3 different stages and all these vendors and things to eat and drink and whatever. So we were there for several hours and just having a good time. But it was rainy this weekend. So we were dealing with rain, and it was all out on the beach, and it had rained so much that literally it feels like you're walking through a swamp because the water was 3 or 4 inches deep because the sand wasn't soaking it up.
But you still had fun.
Yeah, we still had a good time. We wound up leaving. We didn't see Carrie Underwood. It was getting so crowded, and you know, with COVID the way it is, it was just getting a little too people-y for us. So we went back to the room, sat out on the veranda, had a bottle of wine. I looked for more UFOs, but nobody showed up.
No.
Not this week.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but otherwise, I had a good time.
Well, it's you know, you deserve to have a little bit of downtime together, don't you?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything alone together. Well, we went away last month down to Atlantic City, but before that, it had been like a year and a half because of COVID. So we're trying to cram a couple of things in before winter comes, and you can't go anywhere. And you know what's funny is we've been looking at places all over the place for the last few months, trying to book places, and everywhere is booked. Everywhere. Every location, every place we want to go, booked solid. Everyone is traveling right now.
Well, it's the same over here. You know, my son, well, he pre-booked some time ago. He went to Snowdon. Do you remember they went to Snowdon? They climbed a mountain.
Yes.
So when he come back down again, he rebooked for this month, and he's just gone off there again this week to Snowdon again to climb the mountain.
I'm looking at places for next year. And the places, things are already getting booked and filled up for next year. But at the same time,
it's all these stay-at-home vacations, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we have to see what's going to be happening with COVID now. Now they're talking about reinstigating all these mandates and lockdowns, and it's just really crazy right now. So I'm not going to book time at going to a really super nice hotel if I have to walk around with a freaking mask on my face the whole time.
No.
Or go to the restaurant where I'm just not going to do it. I'll wait for things to settle down again.
Well, this is it. You know, this is what I can't get. You know, you go to a really posh hotel or somewhere, and you want to have dinner in the restaurant, especially if it's a top chef or somebody like that. So you dress up, and then you've got the mask on.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we did it last year.
Do you know what? Do you know something, Mark? I haven't put a slap on my face for about 6 months.
Saved your money, huh?
You know, foundation, lipstick, and all that. I haven't put any slap on my face for about 6 months because of having to wear masks.
Yep.
Nobody sees it.
Nope.
You know, the only thing to do is just make up your eyes and leave it at that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why waste lipstick?
Like wearing a job. Oh, I want to get off this subject. It depresses me too much.
What? Going away on vacation?
No.
Makeup.
Segues into the mask stuff.
Oh. Yeah, well, it's a must, isn't it? Really, when you think about it. It saves wearing a mask has saved people's lives.
Yeah.
I don't mind wearing a mask. The only thing is, it steams up my glasses, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Mine too.
Yeah. And I have to wear glasses if I want to read the price of anything in the shop. So, and it just steams them up. And then I'm groping around like in the fog trying to find stuff. So that's the only downfall with wearing this mask at the moment. And the fact that, you know, I don't feel feminine when I go out. I like to dress up. Even if I'm going to the shops, I like to dress up. I like my hair nice. I like my makeup nice. You know, try and knock 10 or 20 years off of me with a bit of slap. And it's just not doing it. I just feel a frump sometimes, an absolute frump. So I'm not going out so much either now, so it makes no difference.
No, I know how that goes. Well, why don't we go ahead?
So should we get on with the interview?
I think we should. So let me introduce our guests for this evening. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. She is an author and one of Ireland's most sought-after metaphysical healers and synergistic speakers. Helen, welcome to the program.
Well, hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Now here's a problem here.
Mary,
you're one of Ireland's most sought after metaphysical.
I'm
that.
Southern Irish.
Southern Irish. Where are you originally from?
Virginia.
Ah, okay.
But I've lived here 22 years. Can't you tell by the accent?
I was going to say, you didn't pick up the Irish accent. Whenever I go someplace, if I'm there too long, I start picking up the local accent.
Much worse. It was much worse than this.
Well, my family originated from Dublin.
All right. My girls live in...
one side of my family, the Donnellys. They come from Dublin.
Where are you in the UK?
Well, I come from England, but I'm in Wales at the moment.
Oh, you're in Wales. Lovely. I was just over in Scotland this week.
Oh, my mother's Scottish. Oh, it's a mix-up, isn't it? My mother's Scottish, and my great-grandparents were Irish. This is on my mother's side. So, Scottish, Irish, and English on my mother's side.
I'm all four as well. I'm Belfast, Abertillery.
Sorry?
I'm Belfast, Abertillery, Kent, and Inverness. I'm a total mutt.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny that my background is English, Irish, Welsh, and I just call myself a Celtic mutt.
That's it. Well, so many are, That's why I get so tickled when Americans, talk about being anything other than immigrants from somewhere else. So.
Oh dear. So now sorry, Mark, I interrupted you when you were introducing this lady. So carry on.
Well, actually, I already introduced Mary Helen, and being a metaphysical healer and speaker, and you're an author of what's the book? Promised by Heaven, A Doctor's Return from the Afterlife to a Destiny of Love and Healing. So I guess we are going to be discussing near-death experiences and the afterlife tonight.
Whatever you like.
Well, both subjects fascinate us. So just for our listeners, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and like how you wound up in Ireland and I guess leading up to your life up to before this near-death experience, and then we can get into that.
Sure. I grew up in Martinsville, Virginia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And my first book is called Promised by Heaven because we had an incident when my mother was pregnant with me. She was in her early 40s, and they had gone to the doctor. My father was a minister, and they'd gone to the doctor, found out my mother had rubella, and they were basically told to go home and get prepared for things not to go well. And my father had a visit. And it was so unusual because, being a minister, you would have expected it to be an angelic or some visit, but he had to describe it as a celestial. He described the beings as celestial beings. I guess that's the easy way to stomach saying, extraterrestrial when you're not comfortable with that. And so it started quite early for me because they basically showed up and told my father, not only was I going to be okay, but I was going to have quite an unusual life path, and that he and my mother were to support me on that journey. So whenever anything happened in my life, my dad always said, "Don't forget you promised," and that's how that first book got its name.
Well,
so
just to clarify, how did your father was visited by other beings? I mean, how did that happen? Is that something that has happened to him before? Did it only happen at this one time? Is this an ongoing event in his life?
Yeah, that was completely out of his scope and out of his comfort zone. And I think they were so shaken by the news that, their fourth child was, they'd been literally prepared for the very worst. And because this was in the first trimester of my mother's pregnancy. And so, remember, this is 1968. I was born in 69. So when she was pregnant with me, they didn't have the means to check and see if things are okay back then. And so what was also interesting is those beings told my father that I would be a girl. And, so of course in 68, there were no gender reveals going on. So it was, it really caught his attention when, of course, I came out and I was a girl, and, they were told, look out, she's going to have some unusual abilities. And so, of course, my parents were kind of hanging out all of my childhood waiting for something to happen. And I was 4 years old when I got the kitchen table talk. And my father, with his big booming Southern voice, called me in and he sat me down. I was 4 years old. And he said to me, "Sugar, do you know the difference between alive and dead?" I'm 4. I was like, and I had, just perfectly spooked my parents, because my best friend at that time in my life, and still to this day, was my grandfather, Dr. Garland Clark, who was a surgeon from Kentucky. And Judge was with me all throughout my childhood and into my adult years. And he would talk to me every single night, still does, and tell me things. And they were things that there's no way that a child of my age could have known. There were people I talked about, things I talked about, places there's no way I could have known. And so that's why Dad had to sit me down and ask, because it was then that they revealed to me that my grandfather had been dead since I was 1. So this kind of really began our adventures together. And that was, and it was then as well that my father, I think he was actually quite concerned because he didn't know what was going on. He was concerned about exploitation, about judgment, and I wasn't even allowed to talk to my siblings. So my 3 siblings didn't even find out about this stuff until they saw it in a book, because my father was still alive at the time, and it was something that he said he just didn't want that kind of judgment coming down on me. Obviously, after I had the car accident and started working in the healing arts, that all changed. But through my childhood and growing up, it was an unusual life, because I had all this crazy stuff going on, these prophetic dreams, and I used to sit at the kitchen table and help my dad write eulogies, like as in talking to the person who was deceased, and then my dad could write down what they wanted him to say. So it was. Sorry about this. Did you ever see anybody else besides your grandfather? Oh, absolutely. Oh, okay. That's a huge part. That's a huge part of what I do. And so it's not like being a medium and conjuring somebody and having a conversation. Yeah. I've had the ability just stroll in and out, did they? Yeah, I've had the ability to kind of walk between worlds for as long as I could remember. So I have quite an unusual interaction with the world around me, as we speak. It's just that I'm chronically and constantly aware of, that there are concurrent realities. And so for people who can't get their head around this and don't understand it, it just sounds like absolute rubbish. But for me, I don't know any other way. I'm constantly aware that if I pick up this phone sitting next to me and move it a foot away from me, that in a parallel existence, that's having a cause and effect reaction. And so, this was something that was really interesting. If you fast forward to, I'll jump into how I got into the accident and all, but there was something that took place during the near-death experience that really was the big changer for me. And it was when I was in the review setting, which sounds so cliche, but you do go back and you're looking at your own life, and lo and behold, you're looking around for the judgment, and it's you who's critiquing yourself. So it is true then, because I've not had a near-death experience. So it is true that you see your whole life flash before you, sort of thing, as they say. It does flash. It's this is the interesting part. So once you've shed the chrysalis of the body, and you're now in this in your original state, and you're in this space, instead of things don't play out in a linear fashion. So I'm in the center of a space that appears to have boundaries, but there are no walls, and my life playing around me in 360 degrees. So it's not like, oh, I was 1, and oh, look how cute, there she is learning to walk, and oh, she's getting her first dog, oh, now she's driving a car. It wasn't like that. Those things were happening at the same time, and my brain melted. So that one is one that took me a while in coming back into a 3-dimensional body. With 5 senses in a 3-dimensional world that was on the precipice of shifting into 4 and 5D. Coming back with that understanding of what's really out there was mind-blowing.
Mary, do you know, I understand this. It's like it's like bringing back a memory to me.
Yeah.
What you're saying is like bringing back some memory.
Mm-hmm.
Is it bringing back a memory of a near-death experience kind of thing, or maybe during an astral travel event?
I've never had a near-death experience. I don't think I have anyway. I may have had one once when I was in a hospital unconscious. And I saw my father and my auntie and another auntie all sitting there in a room with me. And they'd all passed over. But, you know, no, this is bringing back something that I know from way back. It's like something, it's just like deja vu, you know. Mary is explaining this, and I can see it all happening. I understand it.
Maybe
it's hard to explain.
Maybe it was you're remembering your prior lifetime.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe I'm going back to a time when I had died previously. You know, if there was another life, maybe I don't know. But it's like a knowing that what she's saying is correct. What Mary's saying is correct, and it's exactly how it works. Anyway, sorry about that. That's so
cool because, you know, experience all of us would have been through multiple times. Yeah. And so it's interesting for me because I was like, really, me? Why? You know, before I got into that car accident, I had just graduated from college. I was an art major. You know, I was like working, it was, you know, the Gulf War was on and I was doing graphics in a TV station, and then I got thrown in front of a camera because they were out of reporters. You know, that's what I was doing. And then bang, I get hit 75 miles an hour and break my neck, and everything changes on a dime. And, you know, when you go, why me? And then, you know, all these years later, I'm like, why not me? You know, I think I tell a good story, and I tell it from a space of, I don't have to watch my words or what it's, you know, because it's true. What happened is true. And what I'm able to translate to people, I think, is all of my work with frequency is people have a pretty good truth meter. You know, they know when there's BS afoot, and they know when somebody is telling the truth. And so that's because you're connecting in with a frequency. And you know, so I think I got you know, listen, I was a cheerleader in college. I'm you know, the real yay, happy, bubbly type. And so, you know, when somebody's out there telling your story, it kind of works well. And so I'm able to share that story from a place that's kind of blue collar, that makes it easy for people to digest and relate to. And I think that's why I was chosen to tell those stories. Mm-hmm. You know, so, but it was so cool because it reinvented time for me. That's been probably the biggest challenge. I am an extremely poor timekeeper. Not because I'm disrespectful. I hate when people say that people who can't show up on time they have no respect for others. I'm like, I spend all of my time in service and respect of others. I am a timekeeper because time doesn't mean the same thing to me any longer.
Just tell them time is an illusion.
Exactly.
That should shut them up.
So the illusion that you think I'm rude, that's also an illusion. So, yeah. You know, so that was interesting.
I'll tell you, when I go, I'm not looking forward to my life review. I don't want to have to relive this crap again.
Oh, this is what the really awesome part about it is. You're looking at it as an observer. You know, I've written over 10 books now. I've got 3 more on the go at the moment. And one of the things that I find that being an author does for me, it's not about selling the million books. You know, those precious letters I get from an individual who might say, hey, this, what you said there changed my life. That's why you do it. And I have found that being an author and writing and telling these stories allowed me to participate in my life experience as Mary Helen in a completely different way. because when you're in the game and you forget what you actually are and you're like really playing hardcore the role and you're going through all the emotions and doing all that and you're getting caught up in the drama and the angst that, you know, that's part of being human, that's necessary to, you know, struggle is inevitable to the human condition. And being an author and writing the story was very similar to being in that space of doing the review, because you are looking at your life with such compassion and with such honor and such pride in your bravery and your strength. And so things that you think were, you know, just the worst of the worst of the worst, you're able to step back and look at yourself with this incredible empathy. And so the life review is not something to dread, because if you actually understand the purpose of the soul's mission, if you understand why somebody is here in this dimension on this planet Earth, and you realize every single thing is necessary, every thread, the dark and the light, are necessary to weave the tapestry of a lifetime. And when you've completely disassociated from the idea of, oh my God, I didn't want to see myself getting raped again when I was 17. I walked out of that and I'm like, dang, man, I'm a rock star. I walked through that and I was able to completely dissociate from the fact that that was not me. I wasn't permanently damaged. That was something that happened. And there was an aspect of it that I was able to take responsibility for, because I'd put myself in a very unsafe situation. And so you can sit and be a victim all you want to.
You were raped at 17, you say?
I was. And so when I watched that in the review, you might go, oh, I'd hate to see that in a life review. I looked at that from a completely different perspective. It changed everything, you know, and I just, oh, gosh, okay, I see.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what was going through your mind at the time you were looking at this review.
The toast I ate for breakfast, you know, it has no emotional charge. And so you'll find, Mark, when you do that review, that you're looking at all of the things, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, from a completely fresh eye, and it's utterly fascinating. You are like, my God, I can't believe that I did all of that. That's incredible. So, you know, that's what judgment is. The judgment is, there's no, you know, harsh hammers of hell from a vindictive God. That's not, you're there in the chair of the Creator looking at the life you created, and you're very, very proud of your creation.
I'm dreading mine. I'm sorry, but I've been a naughty girl.
Who hasn't?
Sometime. Naughty.
That's the fun of it. And also you have to remember your very naughtiness and some of the bad decisions have been the catalyst for great change in other people's lives.
Yes, I changed other people's lives, definitely.
Being deeply spiritual and understanding doesn't mean that you're being good all the time. For God's sake, how boring would that be?
Yeah. But I know what he's going to be. If the great Creator is there when I'm going through, he's going to go. He'll be tutting all the way.
No, he'll be doing.
Waiting there to hand you a gin
He'll be doing the face palm. You know, it's just like, oh God.
He's saying, oh, this is hopeless. This one.
No, let me rephrase it. He'll be going, oh me.
You would be surprised that that's so many people's perception. And then the funny thing is that we've immediately personified it as he, and we've also created he as a separate entity from us. Yeah. So the big reveal there was the fact that when doing the life review, of course we come from a source that's greater than ourselves, but we're fractals of that same whole. That's right. So we, as aspects of the Creator, are the only ones judging what we've just done.
Just so you're aware,
that's why it's a wonderful experience.
Just to put it in perspective, Mary Ellen, because I make a lot of cracks and jokes and whatever, but I'm actually fully on board with everything that you're saying, and I do understand it, even like, you know, with the concept of God or the Creator. You know, I say him just as, you know, just out of context.
You do, don't you? You do.
I know that. I'm saying that. Look, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't. But there might be somebody who's listening to us.
Right.
Listen, you can crack a joke all you want to, because I'm doing everything to hold my tongue, because I got the mouth like a sailor.
Oh. let it fly free. I usually do, but well, let's take a step back and let's go into the accident and tell us, what happened, and then what your first experiences were when leading up to that life review.
Okay. So I was actually on my way. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, and I lived there because in the South, when you're dating someone, when you graduate from college, your mom's already got the china patterns and the crystal goblets picked out. You're marrying that person. And so, you go on and you move back to wherever they came from. And so my intended was from Charleston. And so with my big fat college degrees, I was working in a sign company mopping the floors. And I had, it was a great experience for me because I was kind of learning how to run business from that every job was equally important. And so I'd been in there, it was a real blow to my ego because I thought with my diploma that I was going to land straight into this posh, fabulous job. And there was me mopping the floors. And so we were having our Christmas party, and it was December 14th, 1991. And so it was Charleston, South Carolina it has two temperature settings, hot and not quite as hot. And so, I was in bright red Bermuda shorts and a Santa Claus t-shirt on the way to this party. And I had a jingle bell necklace around my neck. And I was less than 2 miles from my apartment. And I got to a major intersection, Highway 17. And I was sitting at a red light waiting for my light to turn. And, there were 4 lanes, I think 4 lanes coming one way and 4 the other way. And so when my light turned green, I started making my way across the traffic to go turn left towards town. And so I got across the first couple of lanes and everybody was stopped, no problem. When I got to the last lane, I looked left. And all of a sudden, I realized that car wasn't going to stop, and he had floored it to obviously he was running a red light. It was an 81-year-old gentleman who had almost killed 2 people earlier in the year, and they gave him his license back. And so he'd come kill me, and I'm very grateful for that. But he was blowing through that red light. They said at 75 miles an hour, and he T-boned my car. But what was fascinating was that as soon as I realized I was getting ready to die, everything just stopped. And I mean, it crept at a snail's pace. I had all the time in the world that I needed. And so I had a decision to make, and it was all very natural. I wasn't freaking out. I was like, okay, we're done. And, I was suddenly aware that I'd done it before. And this is where that all comes, that feeling that you were talking about, Irene, before, like when I told that story and you were like, I just know this. In that time, at that moment when everything slows down, you just know what's happening because you've done it before. And as everything slowed, come on, pups. As everything slowed down, I had a decision to make. And that decision was, do I stay in the body and experience the impact, or do I go? And so I was so aware that I had done this so many times that I didn't feel like I needed to stay in the body and experience the impact before dying. So I left. And what was really cool was, this is where my first fascination with frequency comes in, because there was this sound. I mentioned to you guys earlier, I was in Scotland last week, and I'm a huge fan of the sound of the pipes. I love the pipes.
Oh,
and when
it runs through my blood. Every time I hear them, my feet start tapping.
Yep. And when they're filling the bag with air, there's a drone. Yeah. And so there was a low drone in the background as I made that decision that I wanted to get out of my body. So there's that low drone, and up and out I go. And so I got to experience watching myself die. This is what's really cool. It wasn't just a near-death experience where I woke up freshly dead somewhere else. I got to watch myself die. So me, the essence of what I really am, I go up accompanied by that sound, that frequency. And I think that's what kept me tethered to the body. So I'm up and I'm out, and next thing, everything speeds up again. And that car comes hurtling towards my car, and smashes in on the driver's side. My head goes through the window. My neck breaks, glass shatters, everything goes everywhere. And I'm just kind of watching. And the best description that I've ever been able to come up with for people of what that moment is like is if you can imagine you've been out in the garden all day and it's hot and you're all sweaty and sticky and nasty and gross, and you come in the back door and you peel off the dirty clothes and you throw them down next to the washing machine. And then you go have a really, really nice shower. The very last thing you're thinking of when you're in that glorious shower washing off all the muck and grime is the dirty clothes next to the washing machine. And that's what it's like to leave a body.
Oh.
So when that happened, and I was up and out and I watched the accident kind of unfold underneath me, I stuck around for a little while and was able to see like the traffic coming to a halt and people running up. And I saw the officer who came and turned the engine off through the passenger side window. And then there was another sound, and it was a series of sounds that I call like the music of the spheres. It was the most beautiful, beautiful tones that you can imagine. They're otherworldly, unearthly. And it was with those tones that all of a sudden I could not see what was happening at the accident underneath me any longer. And it was like an instant whoosh and I was somewhere else. So I imagine that lots of people have that experience at a slower pace, and that's the tunnel of light experience. Mine was so quick that I didn't get the whole tunnel experience. So I was in one place and then I was in another. It was like instant teleportation. So I land in this space and it was incredible. It was just that the atmosphere breathed. It was palpable. The color was just
vivid.
There's no words for it, And like I've told the story literally 100,000 times, and every time it gives me the chills just to recall and conjure up. I described it once as a place so beautiful that it nearly hurts to remember, because it's not the kind of beauty that one can see with just the eyes. You're now out of the body and you can feel everything around you. You are everything around you, and it's kind of coursing through your soul. And you've just shed that body, and it's like coming home from a dinner party where you've eaten too much and your jeans are about to pop, and you go in and you take the jeans off. And that's the literally, that body is a meat wagon made of stardust that's there to carry who you really are around. You just don't have the attachment to it when you get out of here, which is why it's so humorous that we get so caught up in what it looks like while we're here, because it literally means nothing to us when we go. And
so what were you actually seeing when you were experiencing this, besides the beautiful colors?
It was sounds, it was colors, it was light, and that it was just, you were just there and you were kind of absorbing that and feeling it. Yeah. But then not too long after, the atmosphere in front of me started to take shape, and out of the shape, the atmosphere there, the shapes came forward, and they had taken on kind of very human looking shapes. I'm sure it was for my benefit. I don't think it was necessary for them, but I think it was making the transition from life into a different life easier for me to
the human type shapes was something you could understand, and that's why they done.
And they were just the kindest old men. I'd always loved old people. Old people were my thing. When my friends were,
I'm all right then.
When I was a little kid, my friends were off playing with each other. I was like hanging out in the nursing home, and I just loved elderly people. I couldn't tell you why. I've just always been that way. So it stood to reason that those that would greet me would be the image of these people that I love so much. And so these two elderly gentlemen were there, and the clothing that they wore, again, I think was for my benefit, not necessary. It was the most beautiful. If you can imagine a mixture of caramel and pearl, that was the color of what they had on. But what they had on was like made out of the atmosphere. It's like it was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. And so they waited very patiently, and I knew I was supposed to know who they were, and I could not recall. And finally, it hit me, and I realized that these guys were my guides, and that the stories were true. We all have guides, each of us, every single one of us. We're ever alone. And even in those darkest moments when you think you can't go on, there is, someone or several someones right there with you. And, it's our own separation that takes us into degrees of feeling like we're completely disconnected from our source. But oh my gosh, these guys, they were amazing. So it was just like the best homecoming ever. And it was they who were with me when I did that 360 life review. And so it was like almost to be enveloped in that kind of love. It was to have a reminder from them that, don't forget who's in charge here. It's you. You're critiquing. You're not judging. Yeah. And it was so wonderful. And so they sat through that whole thing with me. And then when I was finished, I suddenly realized that I wasn't done yet. And they didn't push me. They didn't suggest it. They didn't force it. But when they realized that I had made that decision to go back, that's when they stepped in and they said, we're going to raise the bar. Things are going to be different. You're going back enhanced. You're not going to be the same as when you left. And, of course, when you're like in this eternal, divine, omnipotent, amazing, freaking awesome space, you're like, yeah. Until you realize that you've got to make a journey back into an extremely broken body. But at that time when I was, queen of all lost surveyed, I was like, bring it on. I'll do it. Whatever it is, whatever you send me back for, whatever I'm there for. And, it was very clear at that point that the accident had been orchestrated in order to change the path that I was on, because with all of these incredible gifts that I'd had growing up, at that stage as a blooming adult, the most I'd done is my roommate, she was the only person I'd ever told about what was going on. And so we were cheerleaders, and I would write down the score to the basketball games and stick it in an envelope and put it in my underwear drawer. And we'd go cheer, and everybody'd come back, and we'd crack open some beers and open the envelope, and there would be the score. And this was my service to humanity. That was kind of the necessity of the accident there. I had these amazing abilities. And I had so dissociated from them. I was using them as parlor tricks.
Yeah.
I have to, just a quick pause. I wanted to, I was texting Irene on this while you were talking. That color you just described, caramel and like pearl essence. I have seen that.
Like mocha, is it? Like coffee.
Well, I've seen that color before. I had what I can only describe was an OBE, out-of-body experience, going over about 21, 22 years ago, where I was driving cross-country, and I was real tired, and I reached Indianapolis because I was driving out here to Jersey from California, and I was laying in bed, and all of a sudden I had this sensation like I was sinking into the mattress, which I've felt that experience before, but I always fought it. I didn't know what it was. This time I let it happen. And it's not like I saw myself come out of my body or whatnot. Instead, I just found myself somewhere else. And it was these colors, all I could describe was like a hyper colors. But in front of me was this geometric shape, and it was undulating and changing shapes and making different patterns, but yet it was nothing that was seen here on Earth. They couldn't be done in the physical, but the color of it was, I used to describe it as like hypercolor, because it was like this weird color, but it shined and it had this, and I never was able to describe it until you just described it right now. And it was like a caramel color with this pearlescent shine to it that as it undulated.
I know.
Say that again?
And the color is just so cool.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'd never seen anything like it.
And you should check out my friend Jim Bruton sometime. He died in a plane crash and came back, and his book is called The In-Between. And he saw a very unusual, like egg-shaped geometric pattern that I think it might ring a few bells when you if you have a look. And he'd be a very interesting person for you guys to talk to as well. You know, gotta love a plane crash survivor. That's a good one. Take some neck.
Interesting. So
message us his name at some point, or let us have a link to his Facebook page.
Oh, yeah,
and we'll try and find him. It would be good to have him on.
Yeah. And so you were in this space. You had the NDE. I mean, you had the life review. You're all rip roaring and ready to come back. And then what happened when you came back?
Yeah, so I bolt back into the body at breakneck speed. I'm back in a body. My neck is broken. I'm laying on the pavement. And what was so funny, when I came back in, I went to try and stand up, and I actually made it to my feet, which is so bizarre. And then just down I went when the ambulance was there at that stage, and they were coming over with all the gear. And it was so weird because the girl who was to become my sister-in-law at the time, I think she'd arrived, and I remember her looking at me. And also a girl I'd gone to college with was only 2 cars behind me and seen the whole thing happen. And so I remember their faces as I went up, and then obviously I just didn't have, I didn't know my neck was broken. I didn't know. And then just bang, I was back down again. And then of course the ambulance guys came over and strapped me to the board and immobilized the neck and all. And so I'm like wailing on the way to the hospital. Whenever I'd wake up, I was, I'd go in and out of consciousness, and I was like talking about death. And there was a lady in the ambulance, and she's like touching my head, and she was like, "Don't worry, we're not going to let you die." And I'm going, "I've already been dead," And by the time I get to the hospital, I was out again. And when I woke up, I could hear the voices over the loudspeaker in the ER. And it was really, really interesting when I went to try and move and pull myself up, because at that stage, again, I didn't know that my neck was broken. I couldn't swallow properly. But I tried to pull myself up on my elbows, and this guy walks in, and he was in uniform, and he said, "Do you feel well enough to tell me what happened today?" Actually, the first thing he said was, "You're one lucky little lady. And do you feel well enough?" And so I did my best to tell him what was going on. And then suddenly, midway of telling him, I looked at him and I was like, "Wait a second. You're the guy who turned the engine off. I saw you reach in through the passenger side window and turn the engine off." And he's like looking at me. And I'm like, "If you want to know what happened, ask my old suite mate from college was only a couple of cars behind me. She was there." And he's like looking at me, and I start describing stuff that was happening. And so, like, this guy not only turned the engine off, but, like, he was in charge of where they were trying to get the jaws of life, because my body was crushed by the door. The seat had folded up under me. And he's looking at me, and he's like, "There is no way that you could know that." And you could just see he was really, really uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, it was like the penny dropped for both of us at the same time. He realizes what's going on, and I realize suddenly what's going on. And he like backs out of the room, and I never saw him again. And there I am sitting in this room completely mangled, and just realizing, oh, hang on a second. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was dead. That's a tough one to swallow when you come back in.
And he more than likely knew you were dead when he turned that engine off.
I was dead. Yeah, I'd say that was an interesting dinner conversation that night when I was able to tell him what was going on, because he's like, possible way. And then I'm looking, I'm going, yeah, there isn't any possible way unless I could see. I saw everything from overhead. And, because there's no way I would have known that my suite mate was a couple of cars behind me unless I had seen her run up when she realized that the car was mine, that it was me. And, she was from Charleston. I'm from Virginia. That's, 2 states away. So she just so happened to be at the same traffic light on that day as me. There's only 350,000 people live in Charleston. So, slight coincidence. And, so the next couple of days were difficult because I was trying to get my head around the idea that I was just smashed to pieces. I'd lost my hearing. So I'm deaf in my left ear. I detached the retina in my left eye. And then they missed, funny enough, would you believe, a broken neck. I was taken to a teaching hospital and it was a Saturday afternoon. And so somehow the old neck fell through the cracks. And it wasn't until my chiropractor, a guy called Dr. Anthony Ross, he did extensive x-rays. This guy's like a super genius. And he did extensive x-rays and scans on me. And I was just like, the breaks were just incredible. And so every day for me was finding out the next thing that wasn't going to, well, you're never going to have children. I went to, because my pelvis had been smashed. And everything was like a reveal of what I wouldn't be able to do. And it was really funny. I didn't go into any kind of a depression about that I was like, okay, because I really had that lingering taste in my mouth of the idea that I am not my body. So I'm so grateful that was there because I have so many friends who've had near-death experiences that really struggled with that part. They my good friend Peter, he had been a professional dancer before his whole career ahead of him, and his he was hit into the back of a lorry, and his bike and his knees were smashed to pieces. And so imagine coming back in when your whole career is ahead of you, and he'd never dance again. And he went into a deep, dark depression, and all of his work, which is called Convergence Healing, is about how he was able to get himself out of the depression. So we do really well speaking together because he has that side of it, and I never went into depression. Mine was like, please let me climb on your roof so that I can scream to your neighborhood, you need to let yourself off the hook and stop worrying about this stuff and just live. That was all I wanted to do. It was like I couldn't get up fast enough to tell people, oh my gosh, guys, we've had it wrong all along. So that was kind of how it began to unfold. And so it was my grandfather, Judge, my deceased grandfather, who then came and said to me, he always talked about we, like this team, we're sending you to chiropractic school. And I was like, what? I've literally just graduated from 4 years of college. I've been in school my entire life. I am not going anywhere. And, when the dead guy says you're doing it, you can fight all you want to, you're doing it. So I was like, I called my mother and father and I said, are you sitting down? I explained to them that I was getting ready to go back to school to become a doctor, and it was dead silent. And I said, don't worry, Dad, I'm paying for it. And, there I was embarking on a whole new trajectory. And I mean, a whole new one, because as an art major, and a communications major, I had zero science. So I had to go back, like I'm a total right brainer. I had to go back and get associate's degrees in chemistry and physics. I have a degree in physics. That's just a scream to me. I passed by the skin of my teeth because that is not how my head works. And so I had to go and get those degrees in order to enter school. I had my 4 years of undergrad, but I had to have the degrees in chemistry and physics, and then moved into the Doctor of Chiropractic program. And once I got there, then I understood, because I had questioned my grandfather, like, look, you're a medical doctor, a surgeon. How come I can't go that route? And he said that it was essential with what I was going to be doing in the future that I had to learn a vitalistic approach to the human body. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And he said, yeah, he goes, you've got to understand that the human body is there to function on behalf of the spirit. It is the servant of the soul, not the other way around. And so you've got to understand how it works. You have to understand that it is designed intricately and beautifully to perform in such a way that the soul can read what's going on in its environment. It's like a perfect little spacesuit. And so, when things are in it that shouldn't be there, it gets ill. When we are not emotionally dealing with our issues, guess what? We get inflammatory responses. We get ill. We become unwell. And so he said it was essential that I go and I get educated in a way that was such that included all aspects, the chemical, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual meaning of being a human being. In order to be able to assist people on their journeys. And so that's where it began. I'm in the only profession in the world where I could feel people up all day long and it's legal, So I'm learning how to read their energy and interact with them in such a way that I could start to apply this when it came time for me to step full time into metaphysical healing.
Wow.
Now, when your grandfather comes through and you still deal with him up till today, what about what your father experienced before you were born? And have you or are you still in communication with those types of entities?
Absolutely. And so there's a chapter in not the last book I did, the book before that called Understanding is the New Healing. And this is a really cool book because it's the first book in Amazon Audible history that is backed by brainwave states and healing frequencies. So the book is completely immersive. So when I'm telling a story about something, I've picked some of the best examples that I could come up with of the different types of healing that the human body can go through, different types of experiences. And so if I'm telling a story, for example, about a woman in Northern Ireland who's, had to choose between her own life and aborting a child, so back in the 60s, and so, or her husband was going to kill her. And so when somebody's listening to this story, it doesn't mean they have to have that identical story, but if they have something that resonates with that same frequency, which is 396 hertz, it's guilt, fear, shame, grief, anger, self-loathing, and they're listening to that story, the event might not be the same, but the feeling, and that's really all that matters. The feeling is the same. So when they're hearing the story, they're engaging with the frequency, and I'm altering the brainwave state in such a way that they can actually build a new neural pathway on the spot that stops them from going back and reliving that past trauma, and they can pack it away as experience and wisdom as opposed to something that's robbing them on a daily basis energetically. So that book is it's pretty cool, and now I can't even remember why I was talking about that. So I think you were talking about frequencies, and I was asking you if you had interactions with these same types of entities that your father did. It's getting late. I was describing the book, and in that book there is a chapter called Am I Blue? And Am I Blue is about an experience that I had with they're Arcturian. Arcturians are very humanoid. If you can kind of picture the motivational speaker Tony Robbins, if he was periwinkle and hairless, that's kind of what they look like. And so they're just slightly larger than we are. They're between 6.5 and 7 feet tall on average. I've had multiple encounters. I work with a council for as long as I can remember, when I get impressions, when I get visuals, when I'm working in a healing session with someone and I get mind movies and that take me back to the experience in either this lifetime or a past or concurrent lifetime, where their issue is rooted, so that I can go back and help them to let go of that. I am assisted on a regular basis by this council of beings, and there's 12 of them, and there were 9 at first, and then the last 3 that came were distinctly androgynous, and really, really set that term in for me. The rest I could identify in some way as more masculine or feminine, but then the last 3 were completely androgynous. And so I tend to have a deep connection with these particular beings. They're Arcturians, are frequency healers anyway. And so because that's what my life is dedicated to doing, and they tend to be on the spot more often than anybody else. So I would see them quite frequently. I live right in the heart of Ireland. My back garden, the sky, I have no light pollution, so it's like a major highway up there. It's getting a little more difficult as the years go by, obviously, because we've got so many of the Skylink and the satellites and the things that are there now. But it's still easy to discern what's what.
Well, where Irene lives is in a UFO highway.
Well, it's very much the same. I live in the middle of the countryside. No pollution, and it's UFO
and we're
highway.
Energy. Remember, as the crow flies, Irene and I wouldn't be that far apart.
No, that's true.
Well,
it's not very far away from me, you can get to Ireland just across the water from here. Short trip.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Mark?
No, I forget. I was just. So let's get to the point of how did this Southern girl wind up in Ireland?
Chasing ancient symbols. I had an experience when I was just finishing chiropractic college, before I actually moved to Ireland. And I was seeing these symbols 3 at a time. They would appear. And they were flaming orange in color, like you couldn't miss them. And they would stay with me until I actually would get up and write them down. And so I ended up with an entire, like an alphabet of them. There were 21 symbols and then a 20-second primer. And I spent my entire adult life looking for these things because I was deeply connected to them and I knew I was meant to do something with them. And so I came over to Ireland and I was actually looking for these. And it turns out these are called the Goet alphabet. And it's a pre-Atlantean alphabet that goes, it's older than 13,500 years. So, looking at, I guess 13,884 years since the last major cataclysm. And so these would be like storage units. So the same way if a caveman picked up a USB key, he would be like, what is that? These symbols would have been holographic imagery that would have storehoused just volumes of information about our history prior to the last Atlantean cataclysm. So that's what I was here doing. I was trying to piece them together. I found a few here in Ireland and realized then that none of them were collectively in the same place, that the Atlanteans, before that had happened, had sent emissaries out before that cataclysm, and they had gone to different parts of the world, which is why there are different symbols of the one alphabet in so many different places in the earth. But then there's a primer symbol that allows each one to interact with another. So each one of them is frequency based, and basically, So most people will be like, "Oh, did you meet a man?" Yeah, no, I was literally chasing ancient symbols over here. So that's how I got to Ireland.
And
you stayed there. Sorry.
Go ahead, Irene.
No, I'm just saying, you stayed in Ireland.
I've been here 22 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, do you have Irish citizenship or dual citizenship?
I do. Yep. And my daughters are 17 and 19, and their dad lives in New Zealand, and so my daughters have 3 passports. So they're beginning to realize right now just how incredible that is, to have an EU passport, an American passport, and a New Zealand reciprocal with Australia passport.
Yeah, I got a few passports too.
Yeah. So they're in good shape.
What is it that you enjoy most about living in Ireland compared to the U.S.?
Well, I mean, look, Ireland is part of the Atlantean land bridge to continental Europe. I mean, this place is full of magic. Do you know? It really is, and it's evident in the land. The scenery, the landscape is so dramatic, and it's just like. It's like having gone to Scotland and you realize that part of the coast is so different because the landscape changes so dramatically, just in a few short miles, and Ireland is the very same. And so the energy, no matter what happens or who does what here, the energy of that land cannot be spoiled. It's
I think that's the same all over the UK.
Yeah,
not only Ireland, but Wales and Scotland and England.
Water.
It's so different, Mark.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's that part of an ancient civilization that's still above water.
Yeah.
And when you fly back, I'm sure you've noticed when you fly from the UK over to the States, you're going over the Atlantic and there's that enormous thing on the map, Dolphin's Ridge. And that's just an Atlantean, that's a mountain range that literally ran the length of a continent that went from the upper northeast part of the actual continent down to the southwest. And so, you've got tiny little bits like the Azores. Those little 9 islands are the tips of little mountaintops from the Atlantis civilization that stayed above water. Do you know? Ireland is part of that as well. I don't know how much longer Ireland's going to be above water. I'd say maybe a couple of centuries, if that. So it's somewhere I wanted to come back and see, and I wanted to be here and see it the way that it is. I spend time in California for the same reason. So I live there during the summer times ordinarily, and I'm making a point in this lifetime to visit places that I know on my next visit here will be dramatically different in appearance, and I want that stored in my memory.
So you're seeing Earth changes happening?
Absolutely. That's normal. I mean, that happens. It's the funny thing, too. We're going to destroy planet Earth. Never. This place has been here since, infinite, since the dawn of time. That's not how the Earth plane operates. Once we've lost the run of ourselves and gotten too big for our britches, it's like a dog shaking off water. It shakes us off, another civilization gone, and we start over again. That's why there are so many elements of other civilizations. There's always a footprint left. We're never completely wiped out as a species if one notices. There is always a footprint. And so we can trace aspects, and you'd think we would have learned something by now, but it looks like we're very rapidly heading straight back into that same. It's just such an easy trap, with evolution and ingenuity comes that separation and greed, and it's okay. It's a learning process, and it's cyclical. It's I don't think Earth was ever meant for world peace. I don't think that was ever part of the plan here. I've said it's like going to Harvard and getting mad at them because they don't teach you how to cook. You know, well, you want to learn how to cook, go to a cooking school. You want to learn law, go to Harvard. And so the Earth School was never meant for perfect peace. It was meant for the dichotomy of dark and light that it offers, which is actually quite unique throughout the cosmos. And it's a space where, you know, a soul that knows itself, that has no experience of separation, can come in and experience duality in such a way that it gets a view of itself in a way that would otherwise be absolutely impossible. And people always ask, why would we do that to ourselves? Well, you know, we've all been through lockdown for the last year and a half. A lot of people went out and bought some big screen TVs and all that, and they're, you know, happy enough to sit in their own sitting room and put the feet up and watch TV. However, when a movie comes out and it's a really good one, let's say it's a Marvel and it needs that big screen, and you go into the theater and you walk in the door and you're immediately hit with the smell of the buttery popcorn, and you've got your friends with you and you're so excited, you've been hanging out waiting for this to come. You get in, you've got that stadium seating, you're looking down and that giant screen in front of you literally sucks you into the story, and afterwards you get to chit chat about it and have fun and go home. You can watch the same movie on your big screen TV at home. Which one's the better experience? Neither one is better than the other. They're just two completely different ways to view the same thing. And so when a soul comes into this plane and it goes through that dichotomy and experiences, you know, we're always talking about, I think where we lose the run of ourselves every time is we get into this space where we as a species think we're entitled to everything being okay. Nothing should be painful, nothing should be difficult, and we're very hard done by. And so when it gets out of control that way, that's when we begin to see the spiral down, you know. So the Earth responds accordingly. We start seeing climate change. We start gearing up for big changes. It's just the cyclical pattern that we go through here. And then we wipe ourselves out and start over again. And so, you know, we're dangerously close to that right now. Do I think that the cycle couldn't be changed? Of course I do. You know, anything's possible to change. But what's happening right now is quite typical for what happens in this place, where, you know, people are missing the point. The pursuit of peace is literally a moot point because it's not possible. Because that's not the dynamic that we're in here. We are set up here to come here to have different experiences that push us, challenge us, cause us to grow. And without the adversity, without the darkness, we can't find that part of ourselves that we're looking for. And so I think that's a really important thing for people to remember. So it's not a bad thing or that we failed in some way. This is part of a cycle. And so again, remember, there are parallel realities. So you can move, you can interchange between those realities, and you can end up in a reality where that cycle doesn't happen and where Earth does fine and everything's great and we, you know, everybody is all peace, love, and dove. But that's not the only experience that we come here for. And this is when I'm talking to someone who's critically ill and they're finally coming to the realization that they have created the illness in order to learn, to grow, to escape, whatever reason they created it for. When they realize that they themselves are the creator, that's when things change.
Just a couple of comments, just to go back a little bit when we were talking about the different civilizations and cycles in destruction, rebirth, going through it again. It reminds me of the Hopi prophecies that's on, they call it Prophecy Rock, the etchings that are there that show the Hopi legends of that. You know, the Hopi came into this world, which is the fourth world. There were three worlds before that. And in the Prophecy Rock, it does show a branching off of going up to a fifth world, which would make sense if this one goes belly up and we have to start all over again. We would literally be moving into another world. But then there's another aspect I'd like to get your opinion on. You know, we've talked to a lot of psychics and people who are in touch with the spiritual side, and there's talk of an ascension for humanity, raising our vibration to move up out of the third dimension into the fourth and fifth dimensions. So leaving all of this physical, this type of world behind, into advancing onto the next level, which would be a more, I don't want to get love and light, but it's advancing beyond all of the ego and all of the issues that we currently have, and literally living on a higher vibration. What's your opinion of that? Say that again?
That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that there's that concurrent or parallel existence. That world is already there. Mm-hmm. What's happening is that for many people, the veil between our world and that world is becoming very thin. And that's what people are beginning to detach from the heaviness of the body, and the human form. The DNA is actually beginning to crystallize in a completely different way, where they are, if you talk to them about their dream states, they're beginning to get the sensation that the dream state is just as real as their waking state, and that people are evolving and changing into that and stepping into that parallel reality. That's what I'm saying. It's already there. It's been happening the whole time. Anyway, it's people are just waking up to the fact that it's already there.
Okay. What about the concept of reincarnation? And how does that fit in with these? Let's say, we're living this lifetime, we choose to come in and have this experience, but yet also kind of based on what you're talking about, there are multiple parallel realities or lifetimes happening at once. The old version of reincarnation was always very linear. People say you've lived multiple lifetimes over hundreds of thousands of years, possibly. And you come back, you learn your lessons this time, you come back and do it again and learn new things, or learn something that you didn't quite learn before, blah, blah, blah. But more lately, it's been leaning towards the idea of, like you mentioned, with time being irrelevant, all time happening at once, even your life review, it all comes forward at once. And so the idea that we are possibly living all of these lifetimes, whether they're on this plane or in other planes, are all happening at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, like, when I talk in one of my books about the, when we're writing about it or public speaking or doing whatever, you have to remember that you've got such a diverse audience of people who are various levels of understanding. So when we delve into the kind of linear timeline of past lives, sometimes that's as much as somebody can digest, but I always will go ahead and talk about the concurrent or parallel realities to acknowledge the people in the room who can understand that, because it's easier. The human brain works in that linear fashion. It understands, okay, yesterday happened already. I'm in today right now, and tomorrow is waiting to happen. Like that's kind of how we're conditioned to move through our lives. Mm-hmm. But there are also people understanding that yesterday and tomorrow are happening already. They're happening at the same time as now is. And so that's why everything is now. And so, I think different people address that in different ways. For me, it's, I try to do it in a way that's, the idea isn't to talk around a person's, to the point where their head feels like it's going to implode. It's to touch them with a feeling. And this is why frequency is such a huge part of my work, because basically it bypasses all the BS. It bypasses all the mind chatter, all the rhetoric, and it allows someone to go in a state where they remember, and no words have to be spoken. They just go into the space and they're like, okay, I remember this feeling. This is what it feels like not to have any anxiety. Or this is what it feels like not to have any cancer in my body. Its frequency allows somebody to go into a space where they're able to completely and utterly detach and return to that which they actually are. And so once they get that feeling, it's like they take a deep breath and they come back in and then carry on through the life, because they realize, okay, well, hang on a second. This is not what I thought it was. I got this. I can handle this. So frequency is so helpful into helping people understand that concept, because that can be a big pill to swallow as well. The idea that, wait a second, I'm living somewhere else. Where am I? Do you know what's going on? And people will overthink that to the point where they miss, and they'll get hung up on it. Or the constant pursuit of this life and that life. And as I've grown and matured and gotten older in the business, I move more away from that, and more into taking people into the feeling of what it feels like for a body to be whole again. Hey, remember what this feels like? Oh yeah. Well, you have a choice. You can go to that, or you can remain in what you're in right now if there's something you still need to learn from the sick body. And it doesn't take words or explanations. It just takes feeling. And that's why it's such an extremely powerful and effective modality for healing.
In relation to the soul, or what we call the soul, again, the simplified version that most people in, whether you want to call it the New Age or on the spiritual side of things, look at it that we have like this one soul, and it could live multiple lifetimes, or some religions you live the one and then you either go to heaven and hell. But we are souls inhabiting a physical body. But if you look at it from the point of view, let's say, the fact that you're living in multiple existences at once, where I sometimes have trouble is my ego gets in the way, and I have trouble, and almost sometimes I'll have a bit of, I wouldn't call it fear, but a little anxiety at the fact that, once I die, this part of me, because this is all I know in this existence, is gone, or it's merged in. It's like a drop of water being dropped into the ocean. Yeah, it's all part of the bigger aspect of it, but that one drop is just kind of gone. So I struggle with that sometimes, and yet,
and that's why it's important to me to tell the story about what happened in a near-death experience. So imagine I'm the preacher's kid. Can you imagine what I was told growing up? Oh, yeah. And now all of a sudden I'm dead, and I'm going, oh, my God, thank heavens. I still know who I am. Do you know? Mm-hmm. I'm fully in that space, and I'm looking and hearing, and I know there's no body there, but I still feel like I'm encapsulated in something, and I am completely aware of all of my memories, of everything that I had done, of all that was important to me. Those were all very much so part of my consciousness. And so again, we have to step out of the idea of that kind of separatist mentality. We're fractals of the same whole. So you're having multiple lifetimes right now with 8 billion other people on this planet. They are simply fractals of that same soul dressed up in different clothes than you. And so that is a very true idea when we're talking, when I do to you, you do to me, we're doing to each other. Very, very true.
When you crossed over, you had that experience, and you realized you still had your consciousness, and you were remembering all these things, but was it of this lifetime, or were you also able to tap into all of the other existences, or did it not matter at that point?
No, I knew who I was in the lifetime I had just left, and all the other ones.
You did.
And it's like this, you go, oh.
Okay.
Oh yeah. That's what it feels like. It's so natural and so easy, and you just settle straight back into it because it's what you are. You don't have to go try and figure it out right now. Who we are, and with the limitations that we have created for ourselves in these body suits, you couldn't even begin to understand it. The second you shed the mortal coil, it makes immediate sense.
Okay. Because in some ways I'm still. I'm sorry. With Skype, sometimes there's a little delay. In some ways, I'm still dealing with some struggles with grief because 5 years ago I lost my identical twin brother, and we were only 5 minutes apart. So I sometimes, think about, his passing, what he went through, and is he I've been told that he's still around me a lot. I've had a couple of little confirmations, and yet at the same time, it's like that one aspect of him is the one that I knew, but it's only a small part of the greater aspect of his soul, or that structure of what he is.
Right.
So, I struggle sometimes with that. Like, is my brother gone? Is that just a little bit of a personality there? And then, are you familiar with Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion?
I am not.
Okay. He's a pretty big author. He wrote Communion. He's also a UFO abductee, and he's done, he was writing fiction and nonfiction. Long story short, his wife of like 47 years passed away a few years ago from cancer. First she had a major stroke, and then later I think it was cancer. And he wrote a book a couple years ago called The Afterlife Revolution, where he's had ongoing communication with her and her spirit. And there's one aspect of it that really strikes home for me, and I mentioned it on this show before, and you having your experiences, I'd like to see your opinion on it, is at one point he had asked her, when he was able to do some kind of communication with you, "Are you still Anne?" And her response was, "No, I'm me, but I'll still be Anne for you." Meaning that she would present herself in that familiar personality and form, even though that she was back to being the totality of her entire self. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Totally. Well, I can explain that to someone who's fallen in love twice in their life. Mm-hmm. And the love of their life passes away, and then they meet the new love of their life. Which one do they return to? That's that idea that perplexes so many people. And I'm like, both, because they both come from, you lose gender at that stage. You lose that connection that you're husband and wife, but not just two loving souls. So it's the idea, the idea that she would present as Anne to him while he was still in this state that's like when you're in someone's country speaking their native tongue so they can understand you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That makes more sense.
So is your brother around? Yeah, your brother's around. But your brother no longer carries that same image that looks just like you. Mm-hmm. He carries the energetic impression of having done that. He carries all the information is encoded there. The cellular memories of all of that are completely intact. And so just because he doesn't give that appearance of that same being, the fragment of what he is today, that fragment that was your brother is still completely intact. Mm-hmm. And it can detach will, it can interact, it can do. So that essence of that individual. Listen, I've seen people who weren't finished with a lifetime here turn around and come back in as a birth. I've seen that happen on several occasions. What we're able to do is unlimited.
Wait, are you saying that somebody who's still alive technically here coming back in and reincarnating, like dividing, like cells dividing?
Yep.
Well, that makes
sense. Some strange stuff.
So you could be living in multiple lifetimes, not only in different realities, but in the same reality. Like, for example, correct. I could be living 5 different lifetimes right at this very moment in this same exact Earth plane.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to be really mind-blowing when you start to think about it.
It is. Oh gosh, you could we could sit here and melt each other's brains if we wanted to. It just becomes so complex, and the reason that we don't go there, and that our brain kind of, it's like if somebody gets too anxious, like they're anxiety ridden over a certain situation, the body will default and go and faint, so that it doesn't short circuit. The person gets so worked up. Someone who's in the full-blown panic attack, they don't die of a panic attack. They'll pass out first. Mm-hmm. And they pass out so the system can reset itself. And so the brain works a lot that way as well, because when we start to think about something that spins us into a space that we can't recover from, you got two options there. It either shuts off or you move into a psychosis. And a psychosis is simply just an altered way of being able to view that information. Suddenly in a psychosis, that world becomes real. And so we've made them out to be the crazy people. All they're doing is they're altering their brainwave states and patterns in order to be able to digest that information and integrate it into their experience. This is why some people can walk back from a psychosis, no problem, and other people get there and they get stuck there.
Okay. All right. The type of healing work that you do with people, I mean, just in typical, people would come to you. What are some examples of what people would come to you and how you would help them?
Literally anything and everything. So, I mean, cancer probably the most common because it's so common in the human experience. It's such an easy thing to conjure. It's something that was written into our design code so that when we get off track, if we are completely imbalanced in the way that we're approaching or interacting with other people, whether they're in our workspace or our home space, cancer is such an easy thing to get in order to pull us back in and cause us to focus on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Some people get out of it and some people don't. So some people use the opportunity as their time to exit. So when somebody comes in with that, the first thing you do is you go in and you check with the body. Hey, where are we in this? Are you checking out? Is this you trying to get out of here right now because you're done? Because there's nothing you're going to do to bypass that. And if it is the case, then your healing with that individual becomes, how can I serve you? How can I assist you as you make that transition? Mm-hmm. That's the healing. Healing is very misunderstood because people think that it's always got to be the most favorable, positive outcome that makes the person who's left behind feel the best. And that's just not the case. A healing means that you came here and did what you came here to do well. And so for some people, that's to live well. For some people, that's to die well. And so I would assist people through the death process as much as I do through the living process. And I love both equally because I consider both a really great honor. And each one is so different. When you're watching a soul exit this plane, you would think you'd be like looking at a light switch and the dimmer switch would be going down and the light would be getting dimmer and it would snuff out. And it actually looks the exact opposite. When an energy is revving itself up in order to return back into that space, if it's going to continue to come back into this plane, it stays kind of, within a glass ceiling here on this earth plane, rather than moving on into a different experience. And so when it's doing that, it looks like fireworks are going off, and it is the most extraordinary thing to watch. So I can look at somebody, like, for instance, if I'm getting ready to get on a flight and the vast majority of people are popping fireworks, I'm booking another plane because something's afoot, But that's what it looks like. And so it's an incredible process to watch the human body as it shuts down and watch the energy of the soul light up. And become more visible. And then when you're doing a healing with somebody who is choosing to live, what you're doing, and this is again where I use frequency. In the past, I'd put my hands on somebody and I get a movie. I get a mental impression, a mind movie of where do they leave that piece of them behind that is causing them to be ill? Because I don't consider the illness the enemy or something that just has to be gotten rid of. Because if you get rid of an illness for somebody and they don't have the fundamental understanding as to why the illness was in their life, they're going to get sick again. And that's where a healer has to step outside of the ego, and that the ego's, not prizing the healer on to go, I have to get them well. Everybody loves a clap on the shoulder and validation that they've done something good and all. But when you're in this business, it is essential that you stay focused and you keep your head out of the idea that the only positive outcome is one where the person gets rid of their process, their disease process. And that's, you couldn't be further from the truth there. It's how do you best assist a person where they are? And if they are ready to shift a disease process, frequency is so easy because everything is frequency and light just sped up or slowed down. So when you learn how to manipulate that frequency, and I came back in from that death experience, I have a strange type of synesthesia. So if I touch someone who's got a brain cancer, it has a note to it, a melody. And so I can hear this pitch, and I can match that pitch with frequency and basically go in and short circuit the process. So it's like if we're sitting in a room and there's a guitar in the corner and I pluck the E string on that guitar, the guitar in the other corner of the room is going to vibrate on the E string as well. It's simple acoustics, physics. And so if I do the same thing with a cell that's in a disease state, if I play in its presence the frequency of the healthy cell, that cell can rectify itself. It can return itself into a healthy state.
That I believe. I actually, a few years ago, went through a year-long training course on shamanic practitioners and dealing with different types of energy healing. Some of it was also to help with crossing over, helping spirits prepare or people prepare for the crossing over event. There was one aspect we did which was called depossession. And that's where someone may have an attachment, a human spirit attachment that they're not even aware of, someone kind of piggybacking on their lives. And I got to watch it happen where the instructor, there was somebody in the room who had an attachment. She worked with it, reaching out to communicate to the spirit that had attached itself to this woman. And while I couldn't physically see anything, when the time came for it to leave and ascend and go to where it's supposed to go and be greeted by family and friends and whatnot and crossing over, you could feel the energy in the room. And it was just such a beautiful feeling when it happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so cool. And it's so interesting because, entities can be all sorts of things. And it can be low order, disorganized energy that never was a soul. It can be like people can have attachments that are like, it's like stepping in spiritual dog poop. And they can have stuff all over them. Then they can have other attachments or hangers on that are, of an otherworldly nature. There's some fun little buggers out there. But luckily, one of the gifts of synesthesia is I can smell them. So they have different odors to me. So they can evade me. I might not be able to see some of them, but I can smell them. So, it's really interesting the different ways that they can present themselves. So yeah, shifting an entity off of somebody is a really, it's an interesting part of the business for sure.
What about, you hinted at it earlier, especially going over to Ireland, which is such a magical place. And again, there's all the legends and lore of the different types of entities, the Fae, for example, which are very popular over there. So non-human, either nature spirits or interdimensional types of entities. Have you come across that in your journeys?
Absolutely. And, one of the interesting things about Ireland, too, is, the same as where Irene is, in Wales, all over the UK. You've got, not only do you have standing stones, but you have different types of cairns and portal tombs. And, these marked spaces for a reason. And, the people would be so daft to think that it was just a burial ground for something. Absolutely not. These were, huge endeavors to create these spaces. And some of them, like here, the portal tombs in Ireland were literally portal tombs where you could walk into an energy and come out in another space. So I have seen some really unusual stuff here. So again, these are simultaneously happening. These are not people that we wiped out and we came in and, set up all over with our civilization. We don't have that kind of power. these are coexisting. They allow us to see them when they feel like it, and they're happening simultaneously with us.
That's it. They're natural. They're
far more than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we seem to be anything but natural these days.
I'm not natural.
No, well, you're not of this earth anyway, so. Well, here's a question for you, and Irene might appreciate it, or she might not. I've got
grape in my mouth now.
Oh, okay. Well, enjoy your grape.
Go on.
When you have these experiences, like talking with your grandfather or other spirits, whatever, do you sometimes feel like you receive what I would call an information download? Like you're given a whole bunch of information, but you may not be consciously fully aware of what it is?
Absolutely. One of the books that I'm writing at the moment is happening that way.
See, Mark,
and it's really fun. I said to you before, I think a lot of people relate to my material because I write kind of like I speak, and it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to follow. So it's very easy to know when I'm doing that and when something has been downloaded, because it might the energy of it, the language, even there might be words in it that I don't even know what they mean, and that's channeled information that's downloaded.
Yeah, it's not exactly channeling so much like you're receiving information and then you're giving that information out to another person, but just like certain things that maybe you need, whether on a subconscious level or maybe something that you'll need in the future. So it's downloaded and stored in a file and set aside. That type of thing. And the reason I ask that is because, I tease Irene about that sometimes because she sometimes gets downloaded information.
Oh,
my
absolutely.
secrets away, won't you?
Well, I laugh. It was so funny. I was standing on stage once at the ARE, the Edgar Cayce facility in Virginia Beach, and I was lecturing to a big full hall of people, and it was so funny because it was being recorded and live streamed, I think, and it was someone messaged in that was like a live interactive kind of thing, that they were noticing a pattern, and they were the first one to kind of really point it out, that they could watch me when I was downloading something, because there was about a half-second delay, and my eyes went the exact same direction, and then I'd start speaking again. And so it's like it was getting dropped in, and then I was delivering it. So that download process can happen in so many different ways. But yeah, it's definitely something I've experienced.
Very interesting. So what are you currently working on? What's coming out? Now you had a new project that you were working on that was kind of came out of the pandemic?
I've had a few things going on. I finished a screenplay. I was hired to write a screenplay version of a series of books that are remarkably similar to what's going on right now, and the books were written over a decade ago. As in remarkably similar as in calling things by the exact same names. So that was interesting to do, and to be able to present that information to people in a way that was engaging and fun and terrifying and informative all at the same time. So that was a great project. So like I live in Los Angeles in the summertime, so I do a lot of work in Hollywood while I'm there, and so that was a really fun project. And then I just finished the first in a series of books for the LGBTQ community. So they're books for kids from 9 to 12, which are some of the more vulnerable and impressionable years. And so it's called Hugh and the Manatee. And, so there's many books to come in that series that just, that give people the opportunity to have a different understanding of what these kids are like, what they're going through, and they're told in these fun fantasy fiction stories. And, a magical manatee takes little Hugh and his bullies underwater in these magic bubbles and shows them any number of aquatic species that are gender fluid. Some that can change gender identity at will, others that used to be this and then became that. Role reversal where the father is the one who carries the children. And there are plenty of examples in, our little aquatic friends that do that. And so that's Hugh and the Manatee. And, I've got a few other projects going now. I'm actually back in my office at the moment, which has been really interesting, working because my doctor had left that was working in the office for me. So I've been playing doctor since last December. Mm-hmm. So that's been really, really interesting. And I was like, what is going on? Because I haven't done this full time in a long time. And why am I in here? And suddenly I realized what it is because in the midst of the pandemic, I was able to get my hands on that many people who were experiencing not just the physical aspect, but it's the emotional aspects of the coronavirus. I personally am a huge fan. I've had like the best pandemic ever. And I think it's all about, we're looking at a 98.6 survival rate here. And we're also looking at you can't in good conscience look at what's unfolding in the world and think that there's a benign outcome to this. Like you can't. And so I got back into the office in order to be able to start accessing people who not only had COVID, but were so fearful of COVID, or who had family conflict over COVID, or who were on the fence about whether to get vaccinated, or who had gotten vaccinated and regretted it, or who were happily vaccinated, or those who absolutely hardcore were not going to be vaccinated. And I got to gather all of the information and the frequencies, and again, use that synesthesia to pitch a COVID frequency. So it's on my website, which is maryhelenhensley.com. It's a free download for people, and spread it far and wide, because it's a 33-minute meditation that's to be used every single day, and it helps to clear. Initially, people experience that real angst because it has caused people a tremendous amount of angst. And so for the first couple of days, if you feel a little odd and unsettled, that's that coming up to the surface, up and out of your actual tissue. Mm-hmm. And then it eases people into a space. So it is full of all sorts of goodies. So I have pitched the frequency, the resonance of all of the vaccines are in there. And pitched what it sounds like for a body that's recovered from COVID, one that's had COVID, and all of the emotional components of that as well. And people are just having a really, really good time with this frequency.
Maybe that's something you should listen to, Irene. Irene, you there? She must be eating a grape. Yeah, because I feel bad. No,
I couldn't. I was muted because I was listening. And then I forgot which computer I was muted on. I went to the wrong computer. But no, I'm trying to find this website now, Mary.
Here, I'll post the link.
Yeah, so it's just my name, maryhelenhensley.com.
Mm-hmm.
And because poor Irene has had COVID twice, and she was vaccinated in between, so.
Yeah, I'm fully vaccinated, but I have had it twice.
Yeah, and now that it's that on the 20th of September here in Ireland, the booster vaccines are coming out, and those who don't get that will now be considered null and void and unvaccinated.
Yeah, I'm going to get that.
That's a real worry.
Mm.
Especially because they're talking about it being an 8-monthly thing. So,
Yeah. I was vaccinated when they first came out. I've had both vaccines within a certain amount of weeks of each other. I had COVID first, Then I was vaccinated, then vaccinated again, and I've just gone through COVID again. So, and I get my booster, I think, in September sometime, September or...
But would you get a booster
anyway.
having the virus so quickly that you'd still have antibodies?
Sorry, who's talking here?
I'll let Mary Helen talk.
I just heard you say the antibodies. That's one of the big misnomers about the thing. The antibodies are actually quite a small factor in this. It's actually the T cell response. That's the big deal here with this virus. It's we've kind of been conditioned into saying the whole thing. Do you still have your antibodies and all that? That's not what it is. It's the T cellular memory that causes somebody to to have that or not. And so we're seeing a lot of people. The variants are coming. I think. But remember, people are going to respond. The immune system is going to respond to the vaccine. That's what it's built to do. Yeah. And so when people take the vaccine, and those of us who aren't vaccinated, what we're saying is it's not. We don't think that the vaccine itself is shedding. I mean, that's ridiculous. What's happening though is that human beings are, we're nasty little creatures. We've got all sorts of little weird bugs and things going on. So when you peaked the immune system in somebody, and the immune system is responding to that spike protein, and then becomes expressive. The individual is then shedding whatever they're holding on to at that time. That's what's causing the variant. That's the variant. And the variant itself is actually the percentage of change between the original strain and the variant is actually so small that a T cell can still recognize that. So an awful lot, I think, of what's being diagnosed as a second round of COVID for people, or the variant and all. Again, I don't even, the politics of it makes me want to puke. So I just, there's a lot involved in this, and people have to make their own choices. And I support people's right to choose. I'm always about the right to choose. And we're getting into a space though where the choice has been compromised now. And
I've got to admit, Mary, the second round of it was nowhere near the first round. Nowhere near. It was quite easy, actually.
Well, see, you have to remember that for any scientific experiment to be valid, there has to be a control group, and there has to be a placebo. So a tremendous amount of people have gotten placebos and don't realize it. Because when you inject a spike protein into somebody's body, there has to be, in order for it to work, some kind of immunoresponse. So if somebody has gotten away with absolutely zero response, you can be pretty sure they got a placebo. So you might have not gotten a placebo on your first, and might have gotten on your second.
Wait, I understand.
What about long COVID? Sorry, Mark. What about long COVID? What do you make of long COVID? A lot of people are still suffering aches and pains, and I do.
Yeah. I also think when you consistently tell somebody something, if you sit somebody in a room and you tell them 24/7 that they're fat, eventually they're going to get up, even if they're super thin, and look at themselves and go, "Oh my God, I'm fat." Yeah. If you repetitively drill, and it's one of the greatest marketing campaigns ever. I'm sure there are people who are suffering, but if you sit down and chat to those people, you can nearly tell who the ones who are going to have the long haul COVID are. There is a personality type. There is a reaction. And I'm sure, some people will get incensed by that. I'm okay with that. I'm a personality type where I've lived with pain my entire life because of being smashed to bits in an accident. And so I'm accustomed to that. So it doesn't determine what I'm going to do in the course of a day. I ask myself every is what I want to do today bigger than the pain that I'm in? And so I have that kind of a mindset. So I've had absolutely zero. And I had a nice old 5-week run with COVID, the 13th of March, 2020, when it first came out.
That's about time I got mine.
Yeah, I know it well. And I intended to get it when I went. I went with on purpose to get it because I wanted to be able to study it. I'm a scientist. I'm a researcher. That's what I do. So, as far as long haul effects, well, you know what? when I believe you fall into the state of believing that you're going to have long-term effects from something, you're going to have them. Do you know?
Yeah, the majority of people that have got long COVID, though, are the ones that were actually in the hospitals on ventilators and what have you, on machines. Whereas I get aches and pains, but I don't know whether that's down to COVID or whether it's my age or what. It's more than likely my age.
Well, I think people are going to have whatever experience that that they need to. But I believe that hands down.
Yeah.
Okay.
What were you going to say, Mark?
You already got into it. Are you getting
boosters out there? Sorry. Are you going to get boosters out there?
Yeah, they're already talking about it. Who knows what they're going to do, and I agree with Mary Helen. The politics of it makes me sick, so I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, stop though, because at some stage, if you insert too many, go do some homework on what a spike protein does. If you inject somebody with too many spike proteins, what you're doing is you're killing off the immune system. So if they're talking about doing booster shots every 8 months, I would think long and hard. But then what they do is if you don't get that, then you fall back into the ranks of people like me who are unvaccinated. It doesn't matter if you got all your shots and then suddenly you stop, you're no longer considered vaccinated.
And then you're ostracized from society, which seems to be what they're doing for control. But anyway, that's a whole nother show.
It sure is.
Yeah. Well, we actually have come to the end of this show. So, Mary Helen, where can people, again, find you? Now, you have your website, which is maryhelenhensley.com. And
that's the best place to find it.
And where can people find your books?
They're on the website.
Okay. Are they also available on Amazon?
Yep.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, we want to thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been a really fun conversation, very informative, and we hope you enjoyed it as well.
Oh, I did. Absolutely. And, look, I couldn't do what I do without people like you, and I appreciate the platform so much because, it's great if you have a story to tell, but if there's no one to listen to it, what's the point?
Yeah, true.
Right?
Oh, that's like me. It's like I'd complain, but who'd listen?
I'm very grateful to you both.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you, everyone, for listening to another edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And Irene, where can people find us?
Everywhere, people, everywhere.
Okay. Well, everyone, you have a great evening, and we will catch you all next week. Irene, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.